project. Come what may. I'm going to gather the ahadith. I'm going to sieve through them. Okay, this is reliable. It's coming. They say at that point what he started doing was all of his travels, he collected all of these notes. He had them all together. Hundreds of thousands of hadith. He's sitting down and he's putting each hadith inside. And you know what's even more fascinating? What he says is that when they were putting the chapters for his book, he would pray salah. And he would say, Ya Allah, this undertaking, this project that I'm doing is massive. Nobody's done it before me. Nobody's gathered all the Sahih Hadith. It's a monumentous task that I'm undertaking. There are hundreds of chapters in there. Every time he wrote a chapter, he would start with 2 rak'at and he would say, Ya Allah, inspire me to do the right thing. Inspire me to do the right thing. And he does this. And eventually, after years and years of toiling and writing and traveling and all of his hard work, 16 years, he eventually produces what we now know as Al-Jami' al-Musnad al-Sahih al-Mukhtasar min Umuri Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa sunanihi wa ayyamihi, which is known as Sahih al-Bukhari. Now, we can very casually go to like sunnah.com and find the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari or pick up a translation. But you have to appreciate how phenomenal of a task what Imam al-Bukhari did. Any historian worth their salt will know that this has no parallel. The way that you and I today, we're saying إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, we're saying hadith like kalimatan, habibatan, we're just saying it. But we can back up what we say with a hadith book that went through the rigorous process. And tying it back to what we mentioned in the beginning, right now, he's like a superstar. Everybody in the field of hadith, you say Imam al-Bukhari, just as famous as he is right now. I just said hadith, and you didn't even need to think twice that the next word is going to be Bukhari. At that time, he was like that as well. And now he's coming back, the homecoming of a king. He's coming back to Bukhara after so many years. But he stops in Khurasan, and they say as he's entering inside, I want you to imagine he's getting a hero's welcome. He's coming back, everybody's like, you know what? A child from our community, Imam al-Bukhari, he wrote the Sahih. This is him. Wow, amazing. And now he's coming back, and everyone's throwing, flowers at him. Everybody's celebrating. And they say that the day he got back, again, I told you that Canada versus America analogy. He was in Nishapur, not in Bukhara yet. He gets over there, they say the masjid that he was delivering his lessons in, the first lesson, there was no space. Has anyone ever performed Umrah in Ramadan? Anyone over here performed Umrah in Ramadan? Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. Good luck trying to catch Salah if you don't come for Fajr. You want to pray Isha Salah, you better be there at Fajr. You want to pray Taraweeh? I have friends who go there. And they would say to me man, if you don't go before Asr, catch Asr and just stay there, you're not going to get the Salah. That's what Imam al-Bukhari's lessons were like. That if you want to get a front row seat over there, man, you got to park your camel 3 miles away and start walking your way to the masjid. That's the welcome that he got. But subhanAllah, what's the nature of people? Oftentimes, you see somebody rise, we got to step on them to rise ourselves. We got to put them down and use their bones so that we can rise ourselves. So there were people who were very jealous, and they started making this propaganda against him. And slowly, people started getting scared of associating because people are saying, yeah, you can't trust Imam al-Bukhari. He has incorrect beliefs. He's this, he's a deviant. People started making these unfounded rumors. And slowly, people started leaving his gathering. To the point that Ibrahim ibn Ma'qil al-Nasafi says that, listen, I'm walking out with Imam al-Bukhari. And he's like, I can't take this anymore. This is unfounded rumors. And he says, when he came, there was no room to sit in his gathering. 3 years later, after all of this rumor and jealousy and envy and what people were doing, he eventually leaves, and there's literally one person who accompanies him. And then he's moving from place to place, and everybody's so scared. The problem with the rumor is, the moment you start a rumor, nobody wants to verify it. And people are saying, yeah, Imam al-Bukhari, he believes this, or he's like this. And he's like, I'm clarifying, this is not what I believe. But once you start a fire, you can't just wish for it to go away. It's going to catch on and it's going to be a wildfire after that. And now Imam al-Bukhari, he had this rise of a star, but now he's in a low point. And this is another point that I want to make over here, that just because Allah wishes good for you, and you're going to carry on the torch of Islam in whatever way, the torch of Iman in whatever way, even in the capacity of helping youth in your masjid, even in the capacity of writing inspiring articles, or being a role model, or giving people da'wah, whatever capacity, there's no guarantee that you're going to have a group of people with you always singing your praises and patting you on the back. Sometimes it can be very lonely. It can be very lonely. SubhanAllah, just a side note, I got this book the other day. Usually people talk about the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley as the most authoritative biography. In fact, there's a slightly more, they say, accurate biography I've been reading lately. It's called The Dead Are Rising Amongst Us, and by Lee Payne. And it's such a profound, just seeing Malcolm X's rise in his early days, and then towards the latter part where he's getting isolated, but he still held on to the torch of Iman. It's mind-boggling. And you'll see this for so many people. So many people that when push comes to shove, they're holding on to that torch. They're literally holding on to it. And it's like that hadith, that a time will come where holding on to your Iman will be like holding on to lit charcoal. You'll see this for Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa, many of us don't maybe not be aware of this, he actually died in prison because he stood up for the truth. The ruling party at the time, the Abbasids, they wanted him to do something that he felt was unjust. They imprisoned him, he died in prison. Ibn Taymiyyah, the way he died was really unfortunate, like completely ostracized by the community. Like I could go on and list so many people, and the reason I'm saying this, and I want to bring this back to Imam al-Bukhari, that don't think that, oh mashallah, you know what, I got so many followers, I have people who are liking my posts, people who are congratulating me. Sometimes holding on to this torch will have its ups, and sometimes it's going to have its downs, and that's where it becomes important. That am I sincere, or is it that, oh mashallah, every time I share a post, every time I make a video, every time I make a comment, I have hundreds of people liking it, that's why I feel good. Now all of a sudden I say something that is truthful to Islam, but it's hurting certain people's feelings, now I'm like, you know what, I'm going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to put it to the side. I want to talk about mashallah, I had a big platform, and now I want to talk about the oppression of my brothers and sisters in Gaza. Now I see people talking negatively about it, I'm going to go silent all of a sudden. Right? That doesn't mean I'm somehow, disingenuous. It speaks about, am I really holding on to the torch of Iman? And Imam al-Bukhari, towards the latter part of his life, and I'm going to conclude with this, that when Imam al-Bukhari, he was a frail old man. He had given up his entire life for Islam. He's going from city to city, he's going from Nishapur to Bukhara, from Bukhara to Nasaf, from Nasaf to Farabar, from Farabar eventually he gets this letter that from his relatives, listen, come to Samarkand, we'll take care of you. And he's on his way to Samarkand, and he stops in this, it's the year 256, it's about 60 years old, and he stops in this small village called Khartang. And it's really interesting, subhanAllah, it was the last day of Ramadan. It was the last day of Ramadan. He had just prayed Maghrib. So if it's the last day of Ramadan and you pray Maghrib, what does that mean? What day is it? It's Eid. It's Eid. So he just did his last fast, prayed Maghrib Salah, and Imam al-Bukhari, reflecting on his legacy and his life, he has this somber moment where he just breaks down. And they say you never complain about Allah, but feel free to complain to Allah. That's what he did. He didn't want to complain about anything. He didn't complain about Allah. He started crying and he broke down and he said, Ya Allah, I can't take this anymore. They're spreading rumors about me. They're lying about me. All that I've done for the deen, all the sacrifice that I made so that people can say, the Messenger of Allah said, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is how they repay me. But Ya Allah, I didn't do it for them. Ya Allah, I did it for you. But then he says, قَدْ ضَاقَتْ عَلَيَّ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ, repeating the words of Ka'b ibn Malik. قَدْ ضَاقَتْ عَلَيَّ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ, that Ya Allah, when you look at the earth, it's so expansive, but I feel like I'm in this cell, like this 2x2 cell, and I'm claustrophobic. despite how expansive the world is. And he says, Ya Allah, I don't want to complain, but if you feel it's time, I don't mind coming back to you, Ya Allah. And he takes a few steps, and then he says, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. He falls down, and he breathed his last. And what's so fascinating, subhanallah, what's so fascinating is that when he breathed his last, the scholars say that لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَةً, the person who fasts, they get 2 pieces of happiness. فَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ فِطْرِهِ, that you just finished Ramadan, and now you're happy that it's Eid, you get that happiness. وَفَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِ, and then you get a happiness when you go to meet your Creator. And they say Imam al-Bukhari that evening, he got both happiness. He got the happiness of breaking his fast, and then he got the happiness of meeting his Creator. And then Imam al-Bukhari goes back to his Creator. But subhanallah, just a few years after he passes away, you can only suppress a person's legacy so much. Just a few years after he passes away, people realize his name was besmirched unjustly, and then they start appreciating his scholarship, and within a few years, like wildfire, the entire world, from the east to the west, from Bukhara to Andalus and everything else in between, they say, Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahahahu al-Bukhari. And after a few years, Imam Muslim is also there, Muttafaqun alayh. And then today, you and I, Akhrajahu al-Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari, you don't even think twice. There's so much to talk about. But to wrap up, and then inshallah we can open it for Q&A, I just want to point out 2 things. Number 1, you don't have to be speaking a particular language. You don't have to be privileged in luxury and part of a family to hold on to the torch of Iman. If there's a will, there's a way. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And Imam al-Bukhari's life shows that you have turmoil in the beginning, turmoil in the ending, but you can make do and you can make a good outcome out of a difficult situation. And the second thing of Imam al-Bukhari is, when push comes to shove, and you're really thinking to yourself, am I doing this for the sake of Allah? Well, sometimes you're going to be tested. And when nobody's there by your side and you're posting something and nobody's liking it or people are saying something, am I going to stick true with this? And Imam al-Bukhari teaches us that's how you carry on to the torch of Iman. And that's how you pass it on to others as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from the life of Imam al-Bukhari. May his life be an example and exemplar for all of us, and may we be able to also carry on the torch and pass it on to others as well. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. I'll pass it on to Shaykh, inshallah.
Takbir! 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 It's very appropriate that you would speak about the life of Imam Bukhari. I should have already knew that, mashallah, considering your specialty. Jazakallahu khairan for that. Just want to arrange the chairs a little bit, make them in the center. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So some of you have submitted questions already online. We put it in our WhatsApp group. And so if you haven't and you have a question, I want you to keep the questions geared towards the topic for tonight, or either a question about a hadith. Since we have a muhaddith amongst us, if you have a question about any hadith, then who better to ask than our brother right here, inshallah. So I just want to, one point that you made, which I find really interesting, man, and really stood out to me, is when you're on this path of carrying the torch of Iman, and you're trying to establish whatever it is, if it's an organization, if you're trying to establish MSA help, if you're trying to establish a committee within the Masjid, if you're trying to establish an MSA at your school, oftentimes you don't get credit for it. A lot of the path that you walk is going to be lonely. And that's when sincerity really shows itself. You gave the example in the words, and I didn't know that Imam Bukhari actually said the same thing as Ka'b ibn Malik when he was being boycotted by the Prophet ﷺ because his refusal to join the expedition. And he felt like the world was really just caving in on him. That's how lonely he felt. Sometimes it's a lonely path. And the example you gave of Malcolm X and his the part of his life where he was lonely. And I feel like that sometimes too. It's like, we try to do a program, we try to put advertising out there, and sometimes only a few people show up, and that really is like disheartening. Then you have to ask yourself, like, who am I doing this for? Am I doing it to get praise? Like, especially we have cameras looking at us, like the sweetness of Riyadh. The Prophet ﷺ said it was like a black ant on a black rock in the dead of the night. And I wish I could give you the full, now I know I gotta step my hadith game up. I gotta give you the full senate of every hadith that I give, inshallah, I'll reach that level. But sometimes walking the path, trying to do what's right and establish programs and organizations and whatever you feel like is the right thing to do, it's a lonely path. And that's when your sincerity is being put to the test. Because you have to ask yourself, what are you doing it for? Is it for likes? Or is it really to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so the path sometimes is lonely. Sometimes it's lonely, Shaykh. But I wanted to get to a question. Can you expand upon that path being just a lonely path, and maybe your experience with that, trying to establish?
No, I think it's a very important point that there will be instances where it'll be a smooth sail, easy walk, and everybody's going to be following you and no complaints. But more often than not, it's the sunnah of the anbiya. If you just look at the lives of the prophets, it was very difficult. Nuh alayhi salam, he's being mocked at, laughed at. Lut alayhi salam, he's being exiled. Like, it's a very difficult path, and we're only tasting a fraction of it. And I think the purpose of this is not to lose hope and understand that numbers only mean so much. But if I can, despite the lack of numbers, move forward, that's actually a beautiful example of sincerity.
MashaAllah. So this is the first question we have here. It's about a hadith, so I want to go with this one first. I heard that it is haram to have clothes that go past your ankle. Is that true, or is the hadith they use for evidence weak? Can't put the hadith, not enough space.
So this is a good question, and I don't want to get into too many details here, but in summary, the hadith does say that isbal, the word being used isbal, when your clothes go either beneath the ankle or they're dangling, is problematic. But there are other ahadith that clarify khuyala. Khuyala means when your objective of doing this is for showing off, then it is considered haram. So when you put all of the ahadith together, there is this restriction that it's not like, let's say for instance, I have a job as a construction worker, and out of safety I have to make sure that my ankles are covered with my pants, that now somehow it's haram. No, that's fine. But especially in certain cultures where the type of clothes that if they're dragging beneath you, behind you, and it gives me a sense of superiority that, oh, I'm better than the other person, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, sometimes think about Eid Salah, right? You're coming for Eid all dressed up and decked up and you're ready for the day. Honestly, you think to yourself, like, man, I'm dressed better than this person. Or, I'm looking better than this person. I'm more presentable than this person. The hadith of Isbal is trying to say that in that culture, the clothing, that you're wealthy enough to have excessive clothing. You're wealthy enough that when your clothes get dirty, you don't care about it. That means if you have lengthy clothes, that means you don't care getting dirty because you have extra clothes. The other Sahaba, they didn't have enough. So the overarching maqsad of this hadith is don't have pride in your heart. And let's not think that, oh, this is some like 7th century Arabian practice. No, even nowadays, people have certain levels of pride in the way they dress or what they do.
I think we all benefited from that understanding. I think this question was answered because it was the topic of tonight's lecture. What is the most authentic source of hadith?
Yeah. Sahih al-Bukhari.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was listening correctly. Okay, another question, a little bit off the topic, but it's definitely relevant for our lecture series because we've had this topic come up quite a bit. How do we reconcile between trying to be ready for marriage, financially and with education, and trying to please Allah and complete half of our deen? As yourself, you're married, I think, we met up one time at a restaurant.
Our first meeting, mashallah.
MashaAllah. Brother who sponsored one of our iftars, which was Brother Amar Sharif here from Bay 34th Street. And,
by the way, I mean, this is like, I'm not getting sponsored for this, but man, that is the best place to go.
Yes, Bay 34th Street.
Like, I'm telling you, I'm not getting some affiliate link or like 5% for your meals,
yeah.
But that's my go-to for food, halal food, mashallah.
Yeah, so we met up there, and then I always had you in mind for like inviting you to a program, and here it is, you know, manifested. Allah manifested it, mashallah. But my point was, how do we balance being ready for marriage, and you're married, because I met you and I saw your wife at the 834th Street, with having finances and education and degrees and position?
So this is actually a very important question because there are multiple considerations that go into, tying the knot, as they would say, right? And basically put, the scholars would mention that there's a gradation of whether it is fard and necessary for you to get married at this point, or it's a privilege and a spectrum in between. So there's no one size fits all, right? So if I'm freshly out of high school and I really don't have much of a career, I don't have a college degree, but I'm at a point in my life right now that I'm inches away and actively pursuing haram, then your degrees don't mean anything. Your financial stability doesn't mean anything. You're going to have to worry about preserving your Iman at that point, which honestly requires mashwara and conversation and a reality check where everybody has that impulse to do something, but it's a serious consideration. Then the fuqaha say it's wajib at that point. They call it halat al-talqan. It's like really, like you cannot sleep at night, you cannot do anything, it's overcome. But the vast majority of people, they may be somewhere in between where you get these thoughts and it's difficult, but it's not to the point that it's crippling you. The scholars say now you have some respite, some luxury time to like wait it out, but don't wait out to the point that you fall prey to the whispers of shaitan. The hadith comes that when there is a suitable, groom and a bride, and if they delay it, this is one of the sources of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to answer the question, just two considerations. Number one, that is an individual at this point where, yes, I want to complete the half of my deen, that's recommended, but I'm not in a position right now to support my family, I'm not in a position right now to physically, emotionally, or even financially support my partner, then it's a cost-profit analysis that I don't think I'm at that point right now. You're not completing, some people think that just getting married, you're completing half your deen. Well, if you're not ready, you're half baked, you're gonna destroy your half of your deen. Getting into it unready can cause more harm than not. So I would say reasonably, you are allowed to get a degree, you are allowed to get established, but if you start reaching a point right now where it's spiritually impacting you, then getting your master's or finishing off medical school or buying your first home, these considerations are the whispers of shaitan.
Great explanation. Jazakallahu khairan. One question here which I'm very interested in. It's a difficult question. I'll give you that up top. In the hadith about musical instruments with the mu'allaq, so I'm guessing they're saying there's a mu'allaq in that hadith. I'm not sure. I'm sure you know better than me. An official part of the hadith text, and is all forms of music haram based on this?
Yeah, this is a famous discussion on the hadith of Imam al-Bukhari. As you pointed out, yes, mu'allaq, because he says waqala, and there's this debate by Imam Bukhari saying qala, can it be muttasil or not muttasil? But to answer the question, there's a hadith that speaks negatively about music, but there is some questions about its level of authenticity. A lot of modern scholars like Sheikh Hatim al-Auni, they've said that yes, there is legitimate concerns on all of the ahadith that talk about music, and if you look at scholarly opinions on this, it does seem to indicate that all things being equal, there could be some scope for certain instruments, whether it's like the daf or what the case may be, because the ahadith have some concerns on it, but you have to square it with the reality of what music means today. Music today doesn't mean you have that triangle. I don't know if that's like an instrument.
Yeah,
a triangle.
That's a music
That's
instrument. The triangle itself. Yeah.
You got a little triangle, and I don't know, you're singing some poetry about your camel. All right, fine, go ahead, do that. But that's not the vast majority of trending titles today. So to answer the question, from a hadith standpoint, yes, there are some concerns about the legitimacy and the authenticity about that. But from a practical standpoint, the scholars of hadith, scholars of fiqh, and the scholars of Islam, when they talk about music being unlawful, they have more than just one consideration. There are so many considerations. The lyrics, the current culture about music, where does it lead someone to, what thoughts it creates in a person's mind. Putting all of that into consideration, it's very hard to make a blanket argument that regardless of what you listen to, it's permissible. So my suggestion would be, for your own spiritual state, try to avoid it. If you fall into it because of habit or whatever, that's fine, but try your best to get out of it and not become a slave of the music industry.
I like that, the blanket statement. I think it would be fair to say that it goes both ways. Not all music necessarily. If you're doing a beatbox and you're poetry about something that's
100%, like walking into an elevator and there's elevator music playing, it's not like haram to get into an elevator right now you have to take the stairs. Or like, you do spoken word and you have that's fine. Yeah. But oftentimes I'm talking about like trending music is a problem.
I think the generalization of it, just saying music blanketly, because it's a cappella.
Yeah.
You could just
100%.
hum and be
100%.
So
That's fine.
there's more nuance to it, so appreciate you bringing it that. Another question, this is very relevant to the brothers. I like this question. What are your thoughts on shaving beards, and what should we do regarding mustaches? Shave completely or just trim? What is the best thing we could do?
Mashallah, you educated your community well.
They gotta ask the hadith questions, man.
Until this point, I would be thinking, man, they're gonna be asking like, what's the first letter after ba? Like, what's the first before? But mashallah, y'all are asking some deep questions. Mashallah, bless. Mashallah, Allah mazid. But to answer this question about the beard, it's quite clear that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, "A'ful luha," right? Awfu shawarib, that you let your beard grow and you trim your mustache. So two things, to start with the beard. Ibrahim al-Nakhai's position, and the thing that I like to personally hold on to, is that you have to have a beard that gives you, at least for the brothers, makes you look masculine.
I hope there's no sisters with beards. Inshallah, there's not.
I got some funny stories out of it. If you want me to go down that rabbit hole right now, but Jahid has a very funny entry in one of his books where he talks about a community of women who were like warriors, but they also had
bearded women.
The bearded women. So we won't talk about that. But for the brothers, So when you grow your beard, it has to look masculine. So you're not allowed to completely shave it. You should have some masculinity. So I mean, like, is it fist length? Is it long enough? I mean, you don't have to have a fist length beard as long as it's long enough to give off urfan in your context, as well as like people can tell that this guy has some masculine features, number one. In terms of the mustache, both are fine, whether you're comfortable trimming or shaving it. Some scholars consider shaving it a bid'ah, and other scholars say that, you know what, it's fine, but just keep it short, because one of the signs of Islam is a person grows their beard and keeps their mustache short.
Jazakallah khairan. Aisha is in a couple of minutes, so we'll just go with this last one. Let's talk about this one. How do I not, because this is directly relevant to the story of Imam Bukhari, how do I not develop hatred for someone who has wronged me? I don't want to hate them. I think I forgave them, but I always feel irritated by their presence.
SubhanAllah, you know, as Muslims, we should always forgive, because that's something that we're in control of, but it's not always easy to forget. Even Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the person who murdered his most beloved family member, Hamza, would sit right in front of him, he would say, listen, I love you for the sake of Allah, but every time I see you, it brings back the fond memories I have of Hamza. So even the Prophet ﷺ, it was sometimes difficult for him, and that's fine. And the fact that somebody's struggling with these thoughts, it's a good sign that I'm not like outright showing animosity. I've forgiven them. But if somebody's cheated me, somebody's lied to me, somebody's hurt my feelings, it's very hard for me to, show face the exact same way. Even Imam al-Bukhari, towards the ending of his life, it's not like he was bending backwards to make all his critics feel happy. He's like, listen, I'll forgive you for whatever is being done, but I can't go and pretend like nothing ever happened. So to answer the question, it's highly encouraged, and borderline necessary to forgive